ก็อยากจะนำเสนอเกี่ยวกับเรื่องที่เป็นเรื่องในกระแสในขณะนี้นะครับก็เพียงแต่ว่ารู้สึกมันอึดอัดละว่าทำไมเมนสตรีมมีเดียของไทยเราแม้กระทั่งหน่วยงานทางด้านสาธารณสุขเนี่ยพูดในเรื่องหนึ่งที่ซ้ำซากๆนะครับนะแล้วก็จนมีความรู้สึกว่ามันน่าจะมีการพูดในด้านอื่นอย่างเช่นในเรื่องที่การเป็นการป้องกันหรือในการสร้างเสริมในส่วนที่เกี่ยวข้องที่ชาวบ้านก็สามารถทำได้อะแต่พยายามไม่พูดถึงเลยแล้วเมนสตรีมมีเดียก็เน้นแต่เรื่องของfearful แล้วก็ในเรื่องของทำให้เกิดความรู้สึกกลัวค่อนข้างมากนะครับนะซึ่งมันก็เป็นเรื่องที่แปลกประหลาดจริงๆนะครับขอบอกว่าถ้าที่ติดตามมาระยะหนึ่งกว่าปีแล้วเนี่ยบอกได้คำเดียวว่ายังรู้สึกว่ามันเป็นพาราดอกซ์มากๆทีเดียวแต่ก็จะเข้าเป็นการทำคลิปพร้อมๆกับทดสอบในเรื่องของ Action Camera ให้เป็นประโยชน์ด้วยนะครับในส่วนของการใช้กล้อง Action Camera เนี่ยถ้าไปมาถึงเลือกใช้Action Camera เพราะว่าผมทดลองใช้ในส่วนของโทรศัพท์มือถือสมาร์ทโฟนเนี่ยยิงระยะใกล้ในขอบเขตภาพมันจะแคบมากถ้าเวลาบันทึกภาพหน้าจอการบันทึกภาพหน้าจอนี้เพื่อต้องการให้ได้เห็นการแปลนะซึ่งระบบสมาร์ทโฟนของชาวบ้านทั่วๆไปทำไม่ได้แน่ๆนะฮะก็เลยจะอยากเปิดระบบการแปลให้ดูจากหน้าจอเลยจะเห็นชัดๆไปเลยครับจากคลิปนี้จะเห็นได้ชัดเจนนะครับว่าด้านหลังคุณหมอชาวอังกฤษท่านนี้เนี่ยนะครับนะประเด็นที่ให้ดูอันดับแรกคือคุณหมอท่านนี้ก็การันตีด้วยการเป็นยูทูบเบอร์ในสัตว์ที่ว่ามีคนติดตามมากที่สุดแล้วคือดูจากโล่ยูทูบเบอร์ด้านหลังน่าจะเห็นได้ชัดนะครับแล้วก็อีกประเด็นหนึ่งคือในเรื่องของกฎเหล็ก3ข้อเนี่ยยังต้องใช้อยู่กฎเหล็ก3ข้อเนี่ยซึ่งคุณหมอชาวอังกฤษท่านนี้เนี่ยทำเป็นแผ่นผ้าเนี่ยไว้ด้านหลังไว้ตลอดนะครับไม่ว่าจะเป็นการล้างมือการเว้นระยะห่างแล้วก็การใส่หน้ากาก3ข้อนี้คือกฎเหล็กที่ยังต้องใช้อยู่นะครับคุณหมอเขาจะทำแผ่นผ้าเนี่ยไว้ทั้งด้านหลังทุกครั้งเวลาที่ออกคลิปเลยนะครับเรามาดูกันว่าคุณหมอล่าสุดเนี่ยเขาได้พูดถึงเกี่ยวกับวิตามินดียังไง
Welcome to this talk. We're going to be looking at vitamin D deficiency, particularly in India. Now, India is a sunny country, so it might surprise you that there's a very high prevalence of vitamin D deficiency in India. But Indians very often don't spend time in the sun. It's not really cultural to spend time in the sun, and spend a lot of time indoors and work indoors. I've actually, when I've been in India, I've actually cajoled some of my Indian friends to do a bit of sunbathing. They might do it to humour me, but it's really not part of their culture. And of course, very often a lot of body surface area is not exposed, so there's not a lot of body surface skin exposed to get the vitamin D. And we know that 90% of our vitamin D comes from the skin, from the synthesis in the skin from the sunlight, not from the diet. And vitamin D is very important because it's an immunomodulator. Lack of vitamin D definitely impairs the efficiency of the immune system, so we need vitamin D for good immunity. And also there's a lack of vitamin D, you can get too much inflammation, this immunomodulatory effect. And of course we know that excess inflammation, especially in the second week after initial symptoms in COVID, can cause this acute respiratory distress syndrome where the fluid collects in the alveoli. And the reason this fluid collects in the alveoli is because of inflammation. This is an inflammatory process. And we know that all the immune cells that we see here have vitamin D receptors in them. They need vitamin D for normal function. And these are Liz Gould's graphics from last year. Are you getting enough vitamin D? Studies have found many people in northern latitudes are deficient in vitamin D. This deficiency is even more pronounced in people in northern latitudes with darker skin pigmentation, and even in India where it is very sunny. So the darker the colour of skin, the more you're protected from sunburn. That is very good. But of course, the more slowly you will make vitamin D. The lighter the skin, the more prone you are to sunburn, but the more quickly you will make vitamin D. And of course, most people in India are darker coloured than people with European ancestry, so making vitamin D more slowly. So important cultural and genetic factors in vitamin D. Now, I want to refer to the evidence here. Here we've got this paper, Vitamin D Deficiency in India. This is from the Journal of the Family Medicine Primary Care. It's written by Indian clinicians, mostly based in Delhi, mostly from Delhi. Now, the figures here are really quite amazing. Vitamin D deficiency is incredibly prevalent in India. This has got to adversely affect immune function of people in India. And it's a variable that would be so easy to correct. And I know I've talked to a lot of friends in India, and they've all topped up on vitamin D a lot lately. So the message is starting to get through, but certainly we need it to get through much more. So if you're in India, put this on your Facebook page. You know, the simple fact of the matter is that people that are deficient in vitamin D are going to be immunocompromised and more likely to get severe inflammation, and therefore many studies have shown more likely to get sick. So do publicise this. It is really important at the moment. But it's important any time. Now, this article I'm reviewing here was actually written in 2018, and the situation I don't believe is any better. So this is a pre-COVID article, but it just shows how important this is. So prevalence of vitamin D deficiency, and we looked at about 30 studies, range from 40 to 99%. I mean, these are horrendously high levels. Most studies clustered around the reporting that a prevalence of 80 to 90% of people in India are deficient in vitamin D. Now, this is really quite a startling figure. Very high levels of deficiency in vitamin D, therefore, it's reasonable to assume that very high levels of immunocompromise simply through lack of vitamin D. And of course, the population, as I said, largely vegetarian, so not getting a lot of vitamin D from the diet, they're not getting it from the sun. Prevalent in all age groups and high-risk groups alike. And I know, doing some clinics in India, you actually see a lot of children who actually have rickets. They have bendy bones and they have reduced growth because of the lack of vitamin D and calcium. And of course, this is very easy to correct. You actually see this. It is around, and of course, with adults it's harder to detect, but these studies show that it is there. So factors. So major source of vitamin D is synthesis on the skin due to exposure, ultraviolet B, UVB radiation, wavelength 290 to 320 nanometers. Not much of a physicist, but that's what it is. So this is the higher wavelength. So the infrared is at the lower end of the wavelength. Then we have all the Richard of York gave baffling vein, red, orange, yellow, green, indigo, violet, and then beyond that we have the ultraviolet. This is where this comes in. You get it in fish to some extent. Fortified foods with vitamin D and vitamin D supplements. Now, this is interesting, fish, because we have looked on this channel that people in Kerala, where they eat a lot of fish, it was Rahul's research that showed this. We had Rahul on a few times. The people in Kerala who ate a lot of fish died less in the 1918-1919 pandemic. Now, can we say that was the decreased death rate was as a result of less vitamin D deficiency? Well, we can't say that, but it is an interesting correlation. So it's certainly, and as I say, it's a variable that's easy to correct. Vegetables and grains, which are actually the main source of food in India. I mean, in India, in the south of India, especially in poor communities, basically you eat rice and lentils, rice and dal. And in northern India, you tend to eat a lot of chapati or roti. That's like the flat bread and dal. And these foods basically don't contain, well, essentially no vitamin D actually. And combine that with not getting it in the not getting it from the sunshine, and the deficiency is inevitable. So other factors: latitude, So even though it's fairly far south, we looked at those behavioural issues. Solar zenith angle, so basically the sun needs to be higher than 45 degrees in the sky to make any vitamin D. So where I live in the north of England, it's just in the past week or two, towards the end of April, that the sun has been more than 45 degrees in the sky. We actually make some vitamin D. So we're only really making vitamin D for 6 months of the year in Scotland and northern England. And even though there's so much sunshine in India, a lot of it is not being used to make vitamin D in human skin. Atmospheric pollution, huge factor in India. It's getting better now, but the cities in India, New Delhi and Mumbai, terribly polluted. Ozone layer, we looked at maps in New Zealand, you can make vitamin D much quicker because they've got a depleted ozone layer, unfortunately. And of course melanin pigmentation, as we saw on that graphic from Liz. Now the thing I like about this study is it defines the levels. Pretty straightforward, but always worth remembering ourselves. Threshold level, serum vitamin D, so that's the vitamin D in the blood, the 25 vitamin D in the blood. Required to optimise effects may vary in various target organs. Now what this is saying is the levels of vitamin D in the blood, the normal levels were very often dictated by the levels which were needed. The levels were high enough so that people didn't get rickets. But it could be that other organs which need vitamin D need higher levels. So the heart might like one particular level, the brain might like another level, the immune system might like another level. So we have to have it high enough to cover these levels, not just to stop rickets is the important thing. So they're saying deficiency is less than 20 nanograms per mil, which is 50 nanomoles per litre. Insufficiency, they're saying, is 21 to 29 nanograms per mil. Sufficiency is more than 30, and toxicity is more than 150. So very high toxicity threshold for vitamin D. A desirable and safe range of serum vitamin D levels will be, they say, 30 to 100 nanograms per mil, which is 7 to 250 nanomoles per litre. So that's what they're saying is desirable. And deficiency, which they've said is so common, is actually very low. So when they're quoting these deficiency figures, the deficiency of vitamin D, these are people with really very low levels, less than 20 nanograms per mil, and that is what is very prevalent. So this study is saying that this is the optimum range. So ideally, everyone in the world will get their vitamin D levels tested and by their doctors, and then it would be titrated accordingly. But unfortunately, that doesn't always, that very rarely happens. Right, metabolism. Vitamin D needs to facilitate calcium absorption from the gut. So if you're low in vitamin D, you're not going to absorb calcium. So vitamin D encourages the transport of calcium from inside the gut, from foods that we've eaten it in, into the blood. The vitamin D is necessary for gastrointestinal absorption. And parathyroid hormone is secreted in response to low blood serum calcium. So these parathyroid glands, there's 4 parathyroid glands, they're embedded in the back of the thyroid gland. And what they actually do is, when the blood levels of calcium are low, parathormone will be released. So parathyroid is secreted in response to low blood serum calcium. And what the parathyroid hormone will do is will take calcium from the bones and put it into the blood, because you need to maintain the calcium in the blood because it's an electrolyte. But of course that's going to deplete the calcium in the bones, and that's going to cause rickets in children and potentially osteoporosis and bone thinning in adults, where the vitamin D will make sure you're absorbing plenty of calcium, so you don't need to produce the parathormone. So that maintains serum calcium levels by moving calcium from the bones to the blood, therefore the bones can become demineralized. At less than 20 nanograms per mil of serum vitamin D, parathyroid is elevated to maintain serum calcium from bony reserves. So when you're deficient, the parathyroid hormone is released. That takes the calcium from the bones to maintain the amount in the blood which is necessary. At serum vitamin D levels of intestinal calcium absorption reaches its peak. Now, the reason I'm hesitating there is I've left that out. So that serum levels of 30. So when serum levels reach 30 nanograms per mil, when serum levels reach 30 nanograms per mil, in most people, the parathormone will not be produced, and therefore the bones will not be demineralized. That's why they're saying that 30 is the necessary amount, and that's consistent with what they're saying here. Sufficiency is more than 30. So if it's less than 30, you will produce parathyroid hormone, which will essentially be transporting the calcium from the bones into the blood. So that's a very good physiological rationale for saying that below 30 nanograms per mil is an insufficiency. That's actually saying frank deficiency is less than 20 nanograms per mil. So that makes physiological sense. So you will want to avoid the release of the parathyroid hormone, which essentially is the emergency level for keeping calcium up. And the parathyroid hormone will go down as the vitamin D goes from 20 up to 30. So you get to 30, then the parathyroid hormones will be low, and that means you're maintaining the calcium in the bones. So that's quite a useful physiological indicator. But of course, other tissues may need higher levels of vitamin D. Other tissues need higher levels of vitamin D. That's why they're saying sufficiency is more than 30. And they're saying toxicity is not occurring until 150, and serum levels would ideally be 30 to 100. So that actually makes quite a lot of physiological sense. Right, so yeah, that's what we've said. So by the time you get to 30, the parathyroid hormone levels shouldn't be raised, maintaining the calcium in the bones, because the vitamin D is making sure you're absorbing all of the calcium you need from your gastrointestinal tract, as long as there is some in the diet, of course. Consequences of vitamin D, rickets, of course, we know about, the bendy bones in children, muscle strength reduction. Lack of vitamin D reduces muscle strength reduction. But lack of vitamin D is also associated with autoimmune disease, where the immune system attacks the body's own tissues, cardiovascular disease, psychological depression, which can lead to suicide, Parkinson's disease, cancers, infections, tuberculosis, which of course is a chronic infection.
อันนี้อยากจะให้ดูนะว่าผลของการที่ว่าวิตามินดีขาดบกพร่องนะครับนะภาวะของการบกพร่องทางวิตามินดีถ้าสังเกตได้ว่าถ้าคุณดูข่าวบ่อยๆคุณจะสังเกตว่ามันครอบคลุมถึงเรื่องอย่างล่าสุดเนี่ยอย่างเห็นไทรอยด์ใช่ไหมเห็นเบาหวานใช่ไหมหรือแม้กระทั่งโรคทางจิตเวชคือ depressive ที่ล่าสุดที่เกิดขึ้นกับพยาบาลที่ลำปางเข้าใจอย่างครับว่าภาวะบกพร่องทางวิตามินดีเนี่ยมันเกี่ยวข้องกับเรื่องเหล่านี้ด้วยเช่นเดียวกันแล้วมันก็ทำให้เกิดภาวะในเรื่องของการที่ว่าเกิดการติดเจ้าไวรัสพิลึกเนี่ยได้ง่ายมาก
It's an associated with obesity and diabetes mellitus type 2.
โรคอ้วนด้วย
All of these things are associated with and may well be caused by lack of vitamin D. So quite profound things there. Now we know there's an association between obesity and vitamin D. But is that causal? Are people that are low in vitamin D more likely to be obese? It's an interesting association. But certainly there is very strong suggestions and data that points towards the fact that vitamin D deficiency can cause all of these conditions. And with severe vitamin D deficiency, I think a lot of people would agree that these can be caused. So increasing vitamin D levels is just a variable to eliminate the possible spectrum of diseases. Vitamin D is important for immune function, regulation of inflammation, and cellular proliferation and differentiation. And of course, we know that cancer is a disease of excess cellular proliferation. So this paper really is very concerned, and you'll see this is a pre-COVID paper. it's definitely saying that vitamin D is necessary for immunoprotection, immune function. And the prevalence in India is, most studies indicate 80 to 90% of people are deficient. So ironic in such a sunny country. So what the heck to do about this? The authors want to do the following: create awareness amongst the public and healthcare providers about the importance of vitamin D, so you can do that, you can share this information. There is a pressing need in India at the moment, and indeed in other countries. So publicise the consequences of deficiency. Indian diet generally fails to satisfy the daily requirements of vitamin D for normal adults. Therefore, they are advising that Indian manufacturers need to fortify various foods with vitamin D through national programs. But of course, we also know that vitamin D supplements, will increase serum vitamin D levels in the blood. And until it wasn't, I've put down my vitamin D now because I've been out in the sun. But before then, I was taking 4,000 units a day, which is 100 micrograms of vitamin D a day. This silent epidemic should be addressed appropriately with concrete public health action. The paper advises direct quotes. We can imagine the burden this silent pandemic will cause the development of the country. So, strong words, silent epidemic, and probably a silent pandemic of vitamin D deficiency. So the amounts of supplements that are being recommended in the UK at the moment, many think are low. I've told you what I'm taking. You'll have to look at the evidence and decide what's appropriate for you. Go to your own doctor, get your blood tested, titrate your vitamin D levels accordingly is the ideal way to do that. But given that this isn't really an option for many poor people in India, this paper is advising fortification of foods with vitamin D in India, because really things are bad and we need to do something, and this is a variable that could actually be relatively easily eliminated. Now we're going to do some more on on India shortly. So hang fire with that, because I am quite well, I'm sure many of us are quite distressed by the situation in India. So that's information on vitamin D. Look at the paper yourself. It's actually although it's in a medical journal, and it's written by clinicians in India, it's actually quite an accessible article. So click on the link, take you straight to it, read it for yourself, follow the evidence wherever it leads. But don't take my word for the evidence, always check it out and look at it for yourself. Okay, thank you for watching. Sorry that was a bit longer than I meant it to be.
ครับตรวจสอบหลักฐานด้วยตัวคุณเองอย่าเชื่อแม้เมนสตรีมมีเดียนี่หนักหนาสาหัสมากก็ให้ดูให้ดีๆนะครับดูเวลาดูข่าวอย่างน้อยคือให้ดูในภาพใหญ่มันไม่ต้องไปเจาะลึกอย่างแพทย์หรอกนะครับแต่ขอให้ดูในภาพใหญ่ดูในภาพใหญ่ๆแล้วก็จะมองเห็นภาพตามความเป็นจริง